we're not doing nearly as many as she does, right? Because she does that for a living. That's all she does, right? So she has an impressive, her group has an impressive number of like 4,000. Correct me if I'm wrong. Just this year alone, you have screened like over 4,000 resumes, and that's incredibly, like, it's impressive. It's something that probably none of us here in a room have the opportunity to do, because that's not all we do, right? We do so many other things. So Kennedy, I'm gonna let you introduce yourself to the group. What do you do? A little bit about your background, and then let's dive right in.
Yeah, thank you for the introduction. I'm really excited to talk today about this subject of maintenance industry retention because, when it comes to interviewing and hiring the right people and setting them up for success early on, that starts with the recruiter. And I kind of fell into this industry back in 2021 when I moved to Atlanta. So I started on the OM side as a leasing agent and then quickly realized that wasn't going to be for me long term. Although I love the industry, I wanted to do something different involving the multifamily side. So I went over to the supplier side, became a recruiting assistant from there, worked my way up to recruiter, and I've been a recruiter for going on 4 years now. So it has been awesome. It has been challenging. I have learned so much in this, and I don't claim to have all the answers, but I enjoy sharing what I know. And if anyone can take away, anything from this, I'll be happy. So
Before we dive in, Kennedy, I just want to remind everyone on the call, you could always use the hand raise feature if you want to ask a question. We don't necessarily want this to be, Kennedy talking at us. We want it to be as interactive as possible, right? So if you have any thoughts, either like drop them in the comments. I'm going to keep an eye on the comment box, or use the hand raise feature so we could, create like a very interactive session here. And back to you, Kennedy.
totally. Thank you. So when we start the conversation of maintenance retention, I think something important to state is we most of us are not just hiring people all day, every day, like I am. But ultimately, you want to make your lives easier and you see growth, hopefully, in your companies and your roles, and you want to move up to bigger and better things in your career in multifamily. And the only way to do that is to build a strong foundation for retention, employee retention, especially on the maintenance side, since that seems to be the pain point we're always hearing, that it's hard to not only hire maintenance but to keep maintenance. So when Adrian came to me, that's really what I wanted the focus of this conversation to be, because a lot of you who have been in the maintenance realm for some time, you have a in-depth understanding of the technical skills on the maintenance side. I don't have much to offer that you don't know. In fact, I think a lot of you could probably teach me something about that. But I think where my value comes in is just to talk about interviewing and hiring and how that's coupled with employee retention. So when you talk about building maintenance teams that last, it's not just about like one singular hire, right? This is coupled with intentional hiring practices. It's team involvement. It's effective onboarding, leadership support, ongoing leadership support. We're really good maybe about the training period, but then we kind of just leave people to their own devices and they're on this stranded island and they maybe don't feel that support ongoing. But ultimately, it's about creating a culture that's going to value its people as much as it does their performances on site. So I think when it comes to solving like the retention crisis that we're experiencing, that first comes with hiring the right people, of course. And how do we do that? We're going to talk about that in more detail. But we also have to create that environment where people are feeling respected, they're feeling supported, they're set up for long term success. So that's what we're going to talk about today. And the way that I kind of wanted to open this up is just with some food for thought, a question, which is, how do we build maintenance cultures that are going to retain great people? I think with on-site teams, they sometimes lack a voice because there's this disconnect with the people that are on the recruiting side, and then the people that are actually working with this person. That's going to be their peer. And this goes not only for on-site teams, this is also whether you're hiring on a corporate level or whatever position you're in, right? The person that is doing the resume review, the interviewing, the hiring, they're not necessarily the person that's going to be working with them day in and day out. So getting the peers buy-in, I think, is really important, because you want to build that teamwork system. You're giving them the voice, the ability to have one and to have their input. And if you have their buy-in from day one, they're going to support what they help build. So I want to share a personal anecdote about this, because we all have experienced what we call hiring fatigue. It's basically when you first put out a job ad, you have all these people coming in. You've got resumes, you've got interviews, you've got hit after hit, you've got people answering the phone. But all of that kind of reaches like a lull, a stopping point at some point, and the applicants slow down, and then you don't really know what's coming next, and you start to get worried. And that's kind of when the desperation sets in. So this even happens, internally in our office. And it's funny that we could face something like hiring fatigue, because all we do all day is interviewing, right? So you'd think that would be the thing that we're most excited to do. And yes, it is true. I love interviewing, but you do reach that point where you're like, oh, are we looking for the perfect person? Are we looking for the person who's perfect for the job? Because those can be two different things. And you can get really caught up in all the details. And what happened is, we had been through so many interviews, and on the very last day, I had 3 interviews back to back. It took up my entire day. And my boss came to me at the end of the day. She was like, all right, what are we doing? Who are we hiring of these 3 people? And I was like, well, to be honest with you, none of them. I was like, I don't feel confident about any of these people. Um, and that was when she gave me the harsh reality that we were not going to continue to interview or recruit for this. We were going to make a decision on one of these 3 people, and that was that. So she asked, who are we hiring? And I did end up picking the person that I felt had the most potential. But there was a lot of red flags there for me that I could identify. But again, we were reaching that hiring fatigue, that desperation, where it was like, does it really matter? Are we selling them short? Are we not just giving them a chance because we're being too iffy on this? So we ended up making them an offer. That person did not even last 2 weeks. And I know we've all experienced something like this, where we hire someone we maybe shouldn't, and then it bites us in the butt later on. The fact is, when we're all facing that burnout, we're splitting up our job tasks, right? We're already short staffed in the office, and we're pulling weight where we normally don't have to. Everyone gets tired, we get desperate, but we come to end up regretting those decisions later. So yeah, it hits us all. It's not just you guys, it's us, and we do recruiting all day, every day. So something that I think I can add value to the conversation about is what we call soft skills in recruiting. Again, going back to what I said earlier, a lot of you are very familiar with the technical skills surrounding maintenance. I don't need to teach you guys that. But the soft skills are a little bit different, because those are the things that are not going to appear on the resume. Those are the traits that you're going to identify in a candidate as you go throughout the interview process. So that could be things like their willingness to learn, their coachability, that could be their adaptability, that could be their professionalism, or their ability to work as a team. All of those things matter, and they especially matter with maintenance. They can have all the technical skills, but if they lack some of those soft skills, those interpersonal skills, then that doesn't necessarily make them the most qualified candidate for the job. So throughout the presentation, I have incorporated some sample interview questions, because the interview is so important, and asking the right questions is so important. If any of you are looking to update your interview templates, or maybe change some questions, here's some good sample questions that you can take and use. A lot of these are questions that we use still in our interview templates, or have used in the past. So The STAR method, I threw this up here and you're kind of like, what is that? I don't want to get too in depth about that because we have a lot of material to cover as it is. But the STAR method is essentially allowing the applicant to lay out a response that provides a more in-depth situation-based answer instead of just, can you do this, that, or the other? Yes, I can do this, that, or the other. You're asking them to think about a time, recall a time when they did this and what was the outcome. And you're kind of, getting this answer that breaks down situation, task, action, and the result of the situation. So these sample interview questions I have listed up here. Tell me about a time your boss coached you to improve your performance, to learn something new. I think this would demonstrate their willingness to learn, their coachability. I ask this question every day in my interviews. I want to hear about a time where they failed, or maybe they can't think of a time that they failed, but they can think of a time that they did so well that they were asked to take more on, and how did they cope with that and add that to their list of the job duties. um, Another question, tell me about a policy change that you had to follow, but you disagreed with. What was the outcome? This one is interesting to identify their adaptability, especially in this day and age. Technology is like coming at us face first. We have no control over all of the new policies and the tech stack that's being implemented in our companies every single day. So it is a curious thing to learn about a time where maybe they didn't disagree, or maybe they didn't agree with a change or a procedure. They didn't have that consent as a part of the job, but they adapted to those changes. So the important thing at the end of the day is to get your job done, to keep operations running smoothly. How did they do that? And then another question, to tell me about a time someone disrespected you at work. How did you deal with this? Professionalism. At the end of the day, this is a people business. So maintenance, they are interacting with residents, they're interacting with your vendors, they're interacting with your office teams, of course, and your leadership every single day. So the most successful candidates in this industry in maintenance are, the ones that have longevity, because they're able to combine that technical knowledge with those strong people skills. And then lastly, another question I threw up here was just to tell me about a time you succeeded in your role thanks to coworkers. What did you learn from this? And I'm going to say the word interesting a lot on this slide, but I do find these questions interesting because they kind of stop people in their tracks. Uh, a lot of people rehearse for interviews, right? And when you Google interview questions, commonly asked interview questions, the number one thing that's probably going to pop up is, tell me about your strengths, tell me about your weaknesses. Those are the questions that people are preparing for. They have answers rehearsed, but a good interview question is going to stop someone in their tracks and make them think, okay, let me think about a time. Let me recall this. You want to evoke those kinds of responses where it's unexpected because it's not rehearsed. That's where you get your best answers. And when it comes to teamwork, you want to identify if they are humble and can kind of share in their success and pay credit to a team, not just themselves. Interviews are oftentimes a applicant going me, I, and I do like that because I want them to take ownership for their success and their role in a task. But I also need to know that they can identify when to use the collective, the we statements. Right. So ultimately, I think what I'm trying to get across is your interview process, it needs to be tailored to reflect your company's values. So whatever interview process you have in place, how do you demonstrate your company's values? It looks different for everyone, maybe. So for example, with Premier, one of our values is integrity. And we have what we call the integrity assessment that we use on all of our applicants. That goes for our internal employees, that goes for our temp employees. But this is really a fascinating thing because this actually is screening for workman's comp fraud, drug usage, theft, violence, and dependability. So those are some crazy, crazy words to throw out. But we actually took like a 90-day snapshot where we had called almost 600 people. So we received a lot more applications, but the 600 people were the ones that seemed qualified on paper, or that we liked and wanted to move forward with. So that was 600 applicants. And of those 600 people, 10% of the people that we had qualified previously failed that assessment and then became disqualified from the job. So, why is this important? Well, take into consideration, these are people that we actually wanted to move forward with, based on their experience, based on that initial video interview. These are people we wanted. And it should be obvious that someone would never fake a workman's comp injury or admit to faking a workman's comp injury, or that they would not do drugs at work or admit to doing drugs at work. But the answers would absolutely shock you. I pulled some of them just for interest, so I wanted to share them with you. So these are real failures and what answers people gave. This person reports if they needed money badly, they would fake a work-related injury to collect workers' compensation. This person reports that if the company or the boss they were working for was treating them unfairly, they're not sure if they would take things from the company without permission to get even. This person reports that their use of illegal drugs is only once in a while at work or just before going to work. And then I threw another one in here. This person reports that they frequently report to work in a condition where they feel their work performance is hurt by alcohol. Those answers are pretty shocking. Again, this is screening for workman's comp fraud, drug usage, theft, dependability, and violence. So the fact that this is what they admitted to, is quite shocking. And a lot of these people had industry experience. So just keep that in mind. And if you want more information on the integrity assessment, the website that we use, I can get with you and give you more information on that, if this is something that you are interested in implementing at your company. So I want to pivot the conversation to talk about documenting the hiring process, because this is so important when we talk about interviewing someone and employee retention, finding the right people. We have to determine the facts when we're interviewing, not our feelings. So facts over feelings. That ultimately ensures fairness, throughout the hiring process. But documentation is so important because you want all of the answers, you want all of the context of the conversation to be put on paper, to be put on that screen, instead of just going off of your feelings from the conversation or how the interview, went. Because when we're in the thick of it, when we're in the conversation with people, we're not necessarily looking at the facts. We're just having a conversation. So we use what we call Hello Hire, and it's basically like a video platform that documents all of our pre-screen interviews. And those are the interviews that we do before the in-person call. And the reason that I am bringing this up is because Hello Hire is been really useful for us. It has been such a time saver. So it actually provides like AI insights that summarize our conversation. They provide like negative and positive feedback about the candidate. So it just kind of helps move the process along quicker. I want to be clear. The computer's not doing the thinking for us. The computer is not telling us, move forward with this person, don't move forward with this person. We are not, letting the computer make that decision, obviously. This is a human role, recruiting. But at the end of the day, we need technology to work with us, not against us, and speed everything up as fast as possible because we're just moving at a pace that otherwise we wouldn't be able to keep up with. But going back to what I was saying about video interviews, that has been very insightful for us because in the past we did phone interviews, which I would venture to say most people are doing phone interviews. And from what I've gathered, most companies do some kind of pre-screen. So they're not just taking a resume, calling them, and scheduling the in-person interview. They're doing some kind of filtering process before they get to that final stage, right? But the interesting thing that we found with video interviews as opposed to doing phone interviews is that you get to see how they present physically before you waste an hour with that person. Those video chats have saved us from some crazy people, some crazy people. I mean, just to share a few experiences we've had, someone was smoking a cigarette in their car during their interview while on the video camera with us. We had another person, I had a person who was buying groceries. They were in the line, in the checkout line at Kroger, like entering their phone number on the pin pad, while they're talking to me. Um, I had another person who positioned their camera in between their legs instead of me getting like a formal shot of their face. That was very awkward. We've all, I'll just leave you with this because there's other things that are way less PG. But we had another person that conducted their interview with a naked painting mural in the background. Not very professional, and if I were on the phone with any of these people, I wouldn't know that they were smoking a cigarette. I wouldn't know that they're sitting in front of a painted mural. I wouldn't know that they're a weirdo that puts the phone between their legs. So these are things that come to find out when you have more context, and a video interview can be very helpful for that. So just wanted to share some experiences on that and things that have helped be a huge time saver when you're going through this hiring process that seems never ending and you're screening a million people. How do you trim it down? Well, this is some of the ways we have been able to do that, the integrity assessment and the video interviews as well. So I want to move the conversation, beyond filling these positions, because maybe you have done a lot of interviews, you're used to screening resumes, or maybe you're like Kennedy, I don't have any problem finding the people and hiring the people, filling that position. So I think for me, the burning question here is when we talk about maintenance retention, what is the biggest reason people are leaving in the first place at your organization? If you have a high turnover ratio, we need to identify the cause of that in order to find the solution. And while this might seem kind of out of the realm of recruiting and hiring, it's all very related. So that's kind of why I wanted to open up with this question for this segment, because, when it comes to, sorry, did someone say something? Or did I just hear something? No? Okay, cool. When it comes to today's workforce, compensation is always important, okay? It remains important, but it's no longer the only factor that's keeping people at their jobs. So I'm sure some of us have taken a job purely based on what it pays. We've all probably done that at some point in our career. The paycheck looked great. It was what we needed. We took the job. Didn't matter what it was, didn't matter the responsibilities that came with it. We took it because it promised us financial stability. Okay. But I would challenge and ask how many of us actually stayed at that job purely based on what it paid because it paid well. Probably not a lot of us. You probably stayed at that job longer than you would have put up with some other stuff had the compensation not been right in the moment, but you're not necessarily thinking I could see myself here long term. You're going to do what you need to do and get the heck out of there, right? Because at the end of the day, if you're constantly burnt out and you're not having a good experience, then you're not going to stick around. So I want to make that point, because when we talk about what do employees want, so we can better our retention, we need to think about what they're going through currently. And I think at the end of the day, the answer is pretty simple. Employees want a work-life balance. That's what we hear all the time. They want flexible scheduling when it's possible. They want respect for leadership. They want career development opportunities. They want to know that there's abilities to move up and beyond what they're doing now. And they want to feel valued and heard. And I would also venture to say that all of us, want this as well in our own lives and our own careers. So let's talk burnout for a second, because it doesn't matter, again, how competitive that pay is if people are feeling overwhelmed every day. Empathy, communication, they really do have competitive advantages when it comes to retention. When employees are feeling respected, when they're feeling supported, they're more likely to stay. And burnout is a common theme we hear with maintenance professionals when they talk about leaving a job. So it's not just about, oh, I wasn't paid, the right amount to do all that. It was, no, I was paid, but the workload was astronomical and I got tired of it. And it was taking a toll on my physical well-being, on my mental well-being, because I was constantly overworked and I had no support. I had no help.
Uh, Um,
So,
I'm curious
yeah.
here, Kennedy, during the summer time, right? Because you're based in Atlanta, just for context, and your focus is the Atlanta market mainly, correct? Yeah. So, pretty hot in the summertime, right? Probably like we have like 3, 4 months that are pretty brutal. How many of the people that you're interviewing you would say that are expressing, or you get the feeling that they're experiencing burnout? Like what would be a good percentage, and what's the percentage like during the winter, months, for example? I'll say we're like fall or spring, um,
Good.
roughly.
Yeah, because we do a lot of hiring in the summer, obviously, a lot more than the winter. And I think, I mean, the Georgia heat certainly doesn't help everything. I think it makes us all a little crazy. So when you're working outside in the conditions and you really don't have much break, and you're not getting that proper rest time, I'm sure that that does impact you know, their fuse. It becomes a lot shorter, and then that burnout sets in a lot faster. But in general, with ACs going out and all of that, it's just a busier time period. So I would say of the experienced maintenance people we are interviewing, if I had to put a percentage on it, where they're leaving their job because they're facing burnout, it's large. It's got to be 40 to 50%, to be honest, because we're always asking people. I mean, this question I literally had to come up next, so this is a great point to bring up, because why are you leaving your current role? We're always asking that. I want to know what's going on at your current job and why you feel the need to leave. Um, you would be surprised what people are willing to share if they feel like they can open up to you and express some of their like frustrations or experiences. But yeah, it's a large percentage, to answer your question. In the winter months, not so much, because there's kind of this desperation that kicks in. A lot of these people may even have their own like handyman businesses that they've been exploring, and they do really well in those summer months in the busy season, and then their work kind of comes to a stop in the winter, and then they get scared because they realize that they don't have that financial stability. So they're coming to us desperate for work at that point. Um, but it depends on the size of the property, and there's obviously a lot of factors that weigh in when it comes to burnout and why they had that experience. But it's definitely more in the summertime for sure.
Since you're kind of the component in the middle, right, between them and the employer, right? When
Mhm.
someone expresses, I'm burned out, I feel like I'm burned out. Do you have any hesitancy into presenting them to companies, or how do you really judge this? Because in all reality, summer is summer, right? It's busy everywhere. And if they're coming to you, looking for a different opportunity, they're burned out. What are the chances that the next thing that you might help them like secure is not going to be the same experience? So I'm curious about your like how are you thinking about all of this?
That's a great question, because to be honest, that's exactly why I asked this. If you tell me, oh, I experienced burnout because I didn't have any support, it was a two-man maintenance team, I was on call like every single week. It was, my supervisor wasn't very supportive. if I know all these things, I'm going to be very cautious where I send them for attempt to perm opportunity in the future. That's going to be dependent on the size of the property, the, even the leasing office staff, the property manager, and how they support and manage their maintenance team. All of that is going to weigh in. But there's only so much I can gauge as an outsider because I have these great relationships with clients where I can ask them, what they need, and I can ask the temps what they need to be successful and try to create some kind of marriage there. And it's basically like professional matchmaking. But you don't really know until you give it a try sometimes. And that's kind of the conversation I have with a lot of maintenance techs is, hey, you're super experienced in this industry. You have been doing this a while. You could probably go out and find a job on your own. So why are you coming to us now? And that kind of opens the door for that conversation of, well, I've been burned in the past. I've experienced burnout where a job seemed really promising. It paid really well. And I care about that stuff. But at the end of the day, I need to try it out. I need to meet the team, have this experience before I can really say if this is going to be the right fit for me long term.
Jay, would you like to weigh in? You had a great comment I saw right here in a chat box.
Thanks, Adrian. No, she was just kind of going through the reasons why, again, it's the same thing that you had mentioned. What we experience in our own roles is pretty much the same thing that I think any of the roles that we support are going to experience as far as the big picture goes. And I think that's it. It's just being seen, being appreciated, not having to say, look at what I did today. Just some of the things I put down here. You want to be a partner. You want to feel like you're appreciated. And that will keep me in a role far longer when I could have made far more money because I feel like when I walk in the room, I'm part of that team. I'm important. And I don't want to be the one that has to point that out. If I do, I need to go somewhere else. And I think that's why good team members that we want to keep that's trying to do the right thing. I think that's some of the key things that we need to offer.
Yeah, I 100% agree because just to be clear, I think it's easy to get jaded in this because you can do all the right things and support that team member and listen to them and be that shoulder to cry on or whatever you call it in management, and you can still have people screw you over at the end of the day. That happens all the time. It's nothing new, but it's important to not take that experience and apply it to the next person because the moment they feel that shift, that energy, and you're not managing them, you're just demanding from them, it becomes a completely different dynamic and there's no loyalty there. The right ones will stay. And it's hard to find the right ones, but they're there, and you just kind of keep having faith that when you find the good ones, it makes it all worth it. But yeah. Adrian, did you have anything else to add?
I want to ask you, how do you do on the overall presentation? How much are you like 50, 60% in? I don't want to like, I have a ton of questions, right? I don't want to, obviously monopolize the conversation. I want to give everybody else the chance to ask questions and, how to make this interactive because it's not just about, my questions. How do you feel so far? You want to go over, cover some more things and take more questions, or you want to take more questions now? What's your take here?
I mean, I can finish up. I only have like a slide or two left, so I can kind of just continue
Okay.
going through this. And then if anybody has anything to jump on, like that's specific to what I'm talking about in that moment, please interrupt me. I don't care. Um,
Yeah,
but
by all means, everyone, want to make this as interactive as possible. And obviously, once she's done with the presentation, I have questions. But again, I don't want to monopolize. I want for all of you to, to wade in, whether you use that feature or you drop a line in the comments. I'll make sure to keep an eye on chat. So,
I, Adrian, I have a question.
sure.
So how do you reassure your people that you're hiring that everything is what you say it is as far as the culture and everything else? Do you follow up with them? Because I know you're a recruiter, but
yeah.
Are you also HR that they can follow up with you if they do encounter a problem or if it's not exactly what it was sold to them as? Because in the industry, as we all know, that when you get into it, you're promised everything, just like everyone puts their best foot forward during an interview, and then sometimes you find out that it's not the right thing that you were told, or somebody along the way did something, or so. Do you follow up with them? Because that's another thing I think, for reassurance to know that you're following up with the people that you're hiring after the hire, or is it just you hand them off to the company and now HR deals with them from there?
So, I mean, being that I manage my candidates past the interview point, a recruiter for us is really kind of an all-encompassing term. It's not just about interviewing, hiring, selling them this job, and then, I have nothing to do with them after it. I'm continuously working with them directly from there because I also manage the jobs that are coming in. So I have an understanding of these clients and what they want, and then my candidates and what they want. And we don't get it right every time. That goes without saying, I think. But the important piece is to have manage that communication like throughout the temp process or the temp to hire transition. So I'm constantly checking in with the temps because there's nothing worse than something working out all the way to the end until it doesn't. And you can't prevent those situations from happening 100% of the time, but you can sure as heck like do your part to manage the communication so that it doesn't get that far before it becomes an issue. Because it's not always the client saying, hey, this isn't going to work. Sometimes it's the temp employee. So um, once they're hired on permanent by the client, oftentimes we're doing a check-in after they're hired within a few months just to see like how things are going. Are they still at the job? How are they liking it? Because I mean, things change. Like with the turnover in this industry, things can be great when they first start, and then they can, have a new supervisor come in and just, uh, get their whole world rocked, or whatever the situation is. So, yeah, no, we check in with them throughout, and the goal is to really build that relationship and rapport with them and keep that, because these are people that when they're seeking their next opportunity, they come back to work for us, or they trust us enough to refer other people to us for those job opportunities. So I definitely, it's not just a transactional relationship with candidates. It's very much so like an ongoing. Some people have been working for us, I mean, for 15 years off and on over that.
I'm curious, Kennedy, along the same lines, if you're sometimes partnering or like sharing with employers, right? For example, if you get from your candidates a constant, maybe not so great feedback that they're saying, hey, they're disorganized, things are not well over there at the company, and this becomes a pattern, right? From the feedback you're getting. Are you having communication with the organization as well to kind of share that and say, hey, we'll like, we just want to be candid with you and kind of like share some thoughts. This is what we're hearing, maybe you're interested in hearing. And if you are, I'm curious of like what's like the response typically. How receptive are they?
That's a great point. Well, I guess I should say first, I wish more receptive, but I also know that nobody likes to hear their baby's ugly, or, that there's a problem. And oftentimes I'm really not telling them anything that they don't already know. Most of my communication, my points of contact are going to be a regional manager or a property manager, depending on the assignment. So if I'm getting feedback from one temp about a problem, I will monitor that. I'm not necessarily going to action that right away though, because it might just be temp specific, right? And I could put another person there that excels and does fine. But if this is a pattern like what you were saying, where I have multiple employees telling me, this is hazardous working conditions, it's toxic, it's whatever, it's all the things horrible. At that point, I do have to tread lightly with how I bring that discussion to my clients, because like I said, they usually already know what the problems are, and that's usually why they're calling me in the first place, because they can't keep staff because they're dealing with this situation. A lot of the times these are clients who maybe just took over a property and they're trying to get it in, better shape, or maybe they had poor management before and this is a new manager stepping in to really clean things up. So I have to pick and choose wisely, like what I say, and also how I present the opportunity to the candidates. If I know it's going to be a project, if I know there's problems that I can identify and share with the candidate, I try to set them up for that because I want to set you up for success. At the end of the day, I want to send someone that can take on a challenge or take on a problem. But if it veers into territory where it's basically just running off all of my maintenance people that I already don't have a lot of or struggle to retain, then I think it comes down to sometimes just I am not going to be the person that is the best fit to service your needs. I haven't been able to hit the mark. I'm not going to be able to continue to provide staff. I'm out of options. And that's the truth of it.
You mentioned hazardous conditions that sometimes your temps are reporting.
Mhm.
I would love for you to share some of the most outrageous conditions that they have described to you over the years.
Climbing in compactors, being asked to climb in compactors, homeless people in units, the like bullet holes in the office, bullet holes in the units, people walking around with AK-47s. The list is never ending. It really isn't. But yeah, no, I've heard some horror stories for sure. I've heard physical fights. I've heard about murders, suicides. I've experienced that on site myself. So yeah, not all those things are indicative that the working conditions are unsafe. But I think what matters at the end of the day is listening to the employee, and if they feel unsafe, then they're not going to be their best working self for that client, for that property. So you need to pull the plug when it makes sense and act fast, not just sit on that information and wait for things to implode, because problems do not go away. They only get bigger. So you either confront them and deal with it now, or you wait for it to blow up in your face and then you really have a problem. So does that does that help?
No, but totally helpful. I'm gonna stop here with the questions because I know you have more to get into, and then we could have more questions once you finish the presentation. There's a lot going into my mind, right, through the mind, but also once again, by all means, I don't want to be the only one, asking the questions at any given time. That's what we're here for.
Oh. Well, when it comes to, someone who's leaving their current role, ultimately, I want the inside scoop on what is making you look elsewhere, right? So that I can identify where the problem lies. Sometimes the problem is with the candidate. Sometimes the problem is with the property or the management company or whatever have you. So I want that inside scoop so I can kind of determine if this is a candidate specific problem or if it's a valid problem. And then also asking, what would make your next opportunity more successful? So when we talk about burnout or the reason that people are leaving, the answers often reveal to be issues that are related to their workload or the lack of staffing support, or the lack of work-life balance, right? Those are pretty common answers that we get. So what I think is an interesting question to ask an applicant is what would make that next opportunity more successful for them if they feel like they've hit a wall with this opportunity, because you will find out if their asks are reasonable or not, right? And maybe those are things you can implement for them, maybe they aren't, but at least getting that feedback on what they would define to be successful is helpful to open up that honest conversation going into it. Yeah, Bentley.
Yeah. Hi, Kennedy. Thanks for sharing all your insights so far. This is less on the soft side of it, more on kind of like a specifics on how do you attract the right candidates to you in the first place. That's generally where I struggle, is even just finding sufficient people and or the ones who are coming across are either not qualified or the culture's not a fit.
Yeah. Referrals are our best source for hiring and placing people. I will always say that resume source is going to be the most valuable to us, which, going back to what we were talking about earlier with maintaining that rapport with candidates. Even if you don't move forward with people in the moment, maybe you had a better qualified candidate for a role, keeping that archive of people and calling on them at a later date. The strongest candidates are usually the ones who are employed. So keep those people in your back pocket, because you never know when you could need them or reach out to them and maybe present an opportunity at the right time, where it's a better fit and they make that move. So I don't have a perfect answer to this question, because it depends on your market and what position you're recruiting for. There's obviously certain skill levels associated with some positions where it wouldn't be as easy necessarily as just putting a job ad on the job board. But I will say that referrals have been like our most successful source.
Thank you.
Yes, of course. So over the years, we gather a lot of intel on companies, to be honest. That's just something that comes with the territory. We, work directly with clients, but we also have a lot of experience talking to their employees and learning the great parts of working for them, or maybe even the not so great parts. But if anybody ever had any questions or is curious, inquisitive about companies that you may want to pursue like employment with in the future, always feel free to, open a conversation with me. I'm an open book, and I'd love to, share any information I have like in confidence with you. So my last point here is to talk about respecting the candidate experience, because what I said earlier about the strongest candidates being employed is usually the case. When it comes to the recruiting process, you have to respect their time and their commitments, which can be easier said than done, but I'm going to talk about how this is important and why, because you want to be aware of a complicated interview process. If there is multiple interviews happening, that can leave a candidate feeling like the company's employees are maybe not like empowered to make their own decisions, or there's too many buy-ins required. Ultimately, I mean, even for yourself thinking about this, if you were going through the interview process, that would maybe raise some red flags for you. So you want to make the interview process as uncomplicated as possible. But I do want to be clear, there's a difference between a thorough interview process and a complicated one. We've all experienced a complicated one, and we've all experienced a thorough one. And there's a difference between that, because when you talk about a thorough interview process, you're documenting everything, you're getting all the information you need. And yeah, there is a chain of command that you have to answer to. But when we talk about a complicated interview process, that's usually the candidate repeating themselves a lot, or sharing information that they've already put on the application. And it's kind of redundant, and it seems like a waste of time. And we definitely don't want to create that experience right off the bat, because if they're smelling that kind of inefficiency in your company, in your processes, that can directly translate to the experience they have working under you. So just keep in mind that you're kind of setting the tone right away, that this is how it's going to be. So offering flexible interview scheduling, when it comes to an employed candidate, if you are able to get the interviewer on board with interviewing them before their shift, during their lunch breaks, or maybe even like an early afternoon or late afternoon interview, something that's like a little bit more accommodating to their full-time schedule. If they need that, try and pursue that for them, because You ultimately want them to not be missing out on their paycheck or not, put their current employer in a negative position. And I'll talk about that in a little bit more detail in just a second. But flexible interview scheduling, where you can, is super important. Communicate clearly and promptly. I mean, this is probably very obvious what I'm saying here, but what I want to say specifically about this is whether you move forward with someone or you don't, you still should make contact with them to let them know, hey, we didn't move forward with you, or hey, we're looking, you're still in the running, or we're still considering you, but we have a few more interviews happening. Just keeping them up to date throughout the process, sticking to a timeline. I will touch base with you on Friday to give you an update, and then sticking to that and actually reaching out to them on Friday to give them that update. You're setting the expectation that communication is important, and sticking to deadlines when you hold yourself accountable. That's important too, because these are things we would expect from the applicant. We'd expect them to communicate clearly and promptly. Why would we not expect that from ourselves, from our teams as well? And this is easier said than done, I think, in the moment. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of hands in the pot, and it's not always easy, I guess, to keep those applicants in the loop. But I'd really encourage you to do that, because even with what Bentley and I just talked about, like you never know when you need to reach back out to these people. So, keep them on a loose chain so that you have them in the background in case you might need them later. And then respecting notice periods. So this is an interesting topic to me, because you want to avoid putting pressure on an employee to leave their current employer without a proper transition. If you are expecting, and I fully understand, listen, if you are hiring and you're short staffed, you need that person to start like yesterday. I get it. You want them to start the very next day, this week, next Monday, whatever it is. But if you're not giving them the opportunity to put in their 2-week notice, to go through that proper transitional period, they're potentially burning a bridge with their current employer. And while you, in the moment, your intention is to get your property staffed up as quickly as possible, and their business is their business with their current employer and what they have going on, it's kind of an out of sight, out of mind thing, right? What you're encouraging them to do, or setting them up to do, is if they ever do leave you, the expectation is there that they would not have to give a notice. And I'm sure we've always, or all of us have experienced someone just dropping keys and walking away. But if that's the precedence that you set, and your expectation is that that's okay, well, you can't really expect much more from them, when it comes time to leave. So just keep that in mind. I think the golden rule, always applies here, to treat those candidates the way you want your own employees to treat you. And yeah, that is pretty much all I have. I put these questions up because I kind of just wanted some food for thought, in case we wanted to talk about any of these specifically, or maybe you want to take these questions back to your team and kind of digest everything that we've talked about, and open up the conversation.
Before opening up to more questions, Kennedy, how can someone reach out to you?
Email is the quickest way, which is just my first name at apartmentstaffing.com. So that's just singular apartment, singularstaffing.com. And then my first name, which is Kennedy, same spelling as President Kennedy.
You offered a very good list of questions to ask to kind of surface when the candidates, might want to have something to hide, or help you like trigger certain things to surface, like red flags. What I learned personally from interviewing folks is that the longer the conversation taking, the bigger the chance for them to like be more truthful, right? Because someone could only lie for so much. Secondly, I had something that happened to me by mistake. My manager and I were interviewing, and she got pulled into something else. So we had to interview the same person separately. Well, we learned to our shock, right, that we asked similar questions and the person provided different answers between her and I. And that was, a huge red flag. And going forward, we just kind of like made that a kind of like our strategy. Let's interview people separately, confront notes, make sure we ask the same questions to see if they provide the same answer. So I want to ask if you have, and Bentley, you're going to be up next. Immediately, I want to ask you if you have any insights here. What's is there a good length of interview that, resurface that? Is it, 30 minutes, more like 45 minutes, an hour? Like, do you have a system for this? On top of like just asking particular questions, right? That might trigger those honest answers that we need.
Usually what I'll do is look at so it's basically a two-man effort when it comes to the interview process. You have the pre-screen, which is done by an admin, and then you have the actual interview, which is done by a recruiter. So upon like reviewing the admin's notes, if there's anything in there that kind of raises a red flag or seems overly vague to me about why they left a job or something that could be an issue, I ask them about it. I talk about it. If I notice something on their resume that didn't come up during the pre-screen, the notes that the admin left, we open up that conversation, that interview, with me trying to. A lot of an interview is not necessarily about trying to qualify someone, it's trying to disqualify them, really. Like, is there any reason I shouldn't move forward with this person? So sometimes, yeah, that involves me asking deeper questions and kind of just sitting back and listening, because people will reveal a lot to you if you let them. And if you're inquisitive, but you're not like accusatory in the way that you ask things, like if you convey curiosity, that usually invites them to kind of open up and share things that normally they might not feel comfortable doing in an interview setting. But the goal is to make them feel like I'm a confidant, I'm a friend, they can share this with me, and then see what they say.
Bentley left a message. He had to jump on something else. If you want to respond to that as we wrap up, that'd be fantastic. Or not necessarily respond because it wasn't a question. It was like, he was waiting in here of how they
Gotcha.
do things. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Does anybody else have any specific questions?
Nobody else has any questions. Thank you all, as always. I'm going to make sure that immediately after this call, I'm gonna set up the new reoccurring call for us. I know that we have recurring meetings, and there are several folks on this group that can't really make it at this time on Wednesday. Jay, how's Thursday for you? Is Thursday a better day?
It just depends on the calls, man. But I haven't been able to join for eons, so I'm glad I kind of had to guard today, just because, quite frankly, Kennedy, and I want to say thank you so much for the insight. We're trying to build an RMM for my regional maintenance managers to perform that final inspection for the maintenance supervisor. So we get on top of that, and we're trying to build out that, I guess, job aid for that. And so I really wanted to hear your insights. So I appreciate that. I had to make sure I got here today, Adrian, just to hear Kennedy. So throw it down there, and I'll do what I can, man. I'll do what I can. I always want to join.
Yeah, I know, and it's tough, right? I was more like asking about like reoccurring because if you have like a weekly meeting at that time, obviously you're not gonna move your company meeting to accommodate this. Shane,
Right.
Dwayne, any preferences on Thursday? Would you be able to join more often if Thursday we move it around like this time, Thursday?
Again, for me, it all depends on the week. So whatever works best for the rest is probably what you should go with.
Yeah, we just gonna change it to Thursday for right now. See, like, how that does, and how does the mix of folks gets with us, and we kind of try that for a couple of months, and then maybe try something on Tuesday, and just kind of keep it fluid that way. It's never gonna be perfect no matter what. this is the maintenance job, right? If you don't have emergencies, if you don't miss out meetings like this, you're not really doing it right? So thank you all so much, and Kennedy, many thanks for today for putting together a presentation.
Adrian,
Uh,
real quick before you wrap up, I
of
got a
course,
quick question I meant to ask you. I
of course.
couldn't get my hand raised quick enough. Kennedy, do you provide like a written or even electronic maintenance test for the applicants, based upon whether they're supervisors applying for tech roles? And how many of the rest of you are using maintenance tests as part of your hiring process?
It's a great question. We do have a maintenance test. It's formulated on DocuSign. So usually, so the interview process is designed to vet out whether or not they have those technical skills. But the kind of backup that we use for that is references. So we call references. They have to be specific to residential maintenance and be from the field that they're working in, to kind of back up what experience they have in the industry. But if we can't get a hold of certain references, or it's just maybe questionable because they didn't state specific experience this person had, what we'll do is at that point usually administer the maintenance test, which is just kind of our second, like our third backup, really, like plan C. And then depending on how they do, if they get a passing score or not, is kind of what determines what we can qualify them for, whether we can move forward. But it's not position specific necessarily. It's like we have, well, it is, but it isn't. So we have like a maintenance test, we have a punch test, and that's basically it, because those are kind of the two like skilled maintenance positions we're vetting out.
One of the things I run into frequently, especially in a smaller market like we have here in Southwest Florida, everybody knows everybody, right? But you call a reference and you find out it's a brother-in-law or an aunt or an uncle, and 6 months in, it's like, oh, this guy doesn't know any of the stuff that they said he had, which is why I went back to doing the maintenance tests.
Well, and one of the things we ask too, with references specifically, is this person like family member or related to you at all? Tell us up front. It's not necessarily that disqualifies them as a reference if they genuinely have worked with you in some capacity, but I'm not looking for personal references. I know your mom thinks you're great. I know your aunt, cousin, uncle, I think those people can all vouch for you that you're a great person. I don't care about that at this point in time. I care about the technical knowledge. There's also, this is not what we use to vet maintenance experience, but I will share, your company could look into, if the maintenance test is not necessarily super effective, or you want to explore different options within that realm, doing like a AI simulation type maintenance test might be really beneficial. We do that for groundskeeping, just so people can try out the job and see if it's something they want, because people apply for grounds all day and they don't know what the heck it is. So we're like, here, try it out. And then this is a realistic day in the life. So maybe something like that. But yeah, we've talked for years about how to better vet the technical skills in maintenance, because it can be really hard.
So something I would throw out there that you might be able to add as an option for additional revenue driven is come up with an AI test. Because one of the things I struggle with the test, I give it, right? I give it to them on a Teams call or a Zoom call. But I've caught so many of them that are, you can tell they're on their phone on the side looking up the answer or what have you. Where if it was an AI generated thing, then that would make it much more difficult for them to do
Much
that.
more difficult. Yeah, I want to at least make it difficult for you to cheat.
Right.
So
Yes.
that's kind of the idea. They might be smart enough to still cheat, but I'm gonna make it hard for you at
So I
least.
got a test I give them, but and it's all encompassing, right? And I give it to them, and then based upon how they score in different sections, you could say, okay, well, they're a tech 3, or they're a supervisor category, or they're just a groundskeeper, what have you. But like I said, we're doing so much by Teams and Zoom now. It's even hard to know whether they're actually answering the questions, or they're looking them up and answering the questions. So, but
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Yeah.
I took a couple of proctored tests online. I remember like a mole certification was one of them, right? So they had like some things in place that to prevent you from cheating, right? Or like from, checking your phone or like Googling the answers. I thought that was pretty good. And not just that particular one. I think the KMT, right? Jay, correct me if I'm wrong. KMT has like similar setup.
The same
So,
thing. Third-party proctors are watching you and doing all that stuff, and you won't probably find that in the assessments. Look, what we had a lot, even especially when I was in hospitality, when I moved out of multifamily, went to hospitality, it's a psychometric test, right? So they're trying to see if you're a serial killer or whatever. And you never know if you answer the right question or not, but it causes you to, to be thoughtful about it and try to be transparent.
Yeah.
But I loved back in the day that you had the written assessments. What happens being in this role for a while and looking at it from an HR and a risk perspective, is and this was an example. It's an easy example. You mentioned being a small area, right? It's small, everybody knows everybody. So I think what I heard once that happened is it wasn't us, but a company used a written test for a maintenance supervisor, and he didn't get it. He didn't pass, but his friend did it, and they didn't offer him the test, and he got the job. That offers a potential issue with HR. You have unfair hiring practices, right? And that's the simple part of it. So the other thing is, back in the day when we used to make our own assessments, I remember taking some in Chicago as a chief engineer. Came on in, knew the stuff down, right? It was just simple things like pH of pools and chlorine. And I wrote it, and the guy came in and said I got it wrong. And he shared with me this stuff, and I disagreed with the answers. I knew better, but whoever's making that test, the test is only as good as somebody's ego that thinks they've got some great questions and they think their answers are accurate. So I put it in the chat, but I've been wanting to bring written assessments back for the skill sets, but it would only be with a third party that created that we kind of vetted. It has to be offered to every single candidate, and that's how you do it. And we wouldn't be the ones scoring them. It would be a third party. So I would like to see that, because again, the majority of the people that are at our places, talent, our offices, our companies are using talent, and we're helping now to try to cross-train them a little bit, but they don't know. And they shouldn't have to, the metrics of the skill sets to ask these individuals and know if their answers are correct, right? Because as we know, you can give 3 or 4 answers that are fairly correct, but if there's only one written answer that somebody's going on and they don't have the understanding of the skill, then they're just going to mark it wrong. So there's a lot of vague parts that you can lose a good person to in a written assessment. So I think they're a great idea, but they're very, very touchy. That's my opinion.
Yeah, so I only do no right-in answers. They're all true and false or multiple choice, and that way, there is no gray area. It's the answer.
That's a better way to go for sure.
True,
Yeah.
it's false, or you're picking. Everybody's picking for the same 4 options per se, right? So for that very reason, that's exactly why I designed it that way. I didn't want a supervisor that's given the test that, oh, well, I like this guy, so I'm going to say this is close enough when it's not, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Great points, gentlemen. I also wanted to point out that Jay comes, the several last years of his career were with very large operators. The larger the operator, the larger the target, to lawsuits and things of that nature. And also the harder is to maintain consistency. So I could completely understand, although for like a smaller operator that, has 2, 3 openings, 5 openings, that they don't feel like, they need such a structure, even though they probably do, right? For someone like, your current employer and, Greystar, where you used to work at, it's like it's an entire job to just keep everything consistent. And it's extremely difficult, when you.
It's a hard trade-off, but it was a hard trade-off going from the field or running, as a regional or a site team, right? You can kind of control that. There's things you can do, you can get away with when you're seeing, but also when you're seeing that from just like Kennedy, 4,000 interviews, whenever you're looking at that at daily risk reports for 2,500 communities, things like that for years, you can't help but see the patterns. And so you become risk averse and you start worrying about what you used to do on site because you could do it. You start cutting that out of policy, and that's where big companies start doing that because the cost isn't worth the reward, So, but anyway, same thing with hiring practices. You start seeing it from that view, but you have to train the why back down to the site teams that are doing the interviews, that are performing the inspections, that are coaching the teams. It's you have to take that. It is what it is. You have to take that lessons learned and explain to them. I wish somebody did that to me 20 years ago, right?
Yeah, and that's why I brought it up. I think it'd be awesome if there was a third party out there that would create the tests that you
Yeah.
could go to have them perform the test. Even if they're not, using them for all aspects of the hiring process, but somebody that we could just, okay, here's a link. You're going to have to go in here and pay whatever it is for that test and let them go ahead and issue the test, proctor it, grade it, and send you the result, but I haven't found anybody yet. So
It sounds like a great opportunity, Adrian, and we're kind of interested in that. So if I find something, I'll certainly share it with the group. I'll share it with you, Adrian, so you can spread the word if we like it. Because I'm actively interested in. I'm not sure if we're going to do it this year or next year, but I am asking our talent team to consider it, and they're open to it, but only if we did it that way.
Maybe since I'm one of the very few, there's not an operator in the room, right? So I'm kind of like impartial. Maybe this is a good, business, like, little piece to offer with technology and everything that's available. And, AI makes it very easy to administrate it nowadays.
Build a website with AI. There you go.
Yep, exactly.
A platform.
Well, thank you also very much. And thank you, Kennedy. Very good presentation today. Thank you for putting it together, for taking the time and sharing everything with us. And Shelby, thank you for joining us today. We'll see you all in 2 weeks on Thursday at this time, 2 p.m. Eastern time. Take care. Have a great rest of your week.
thank you.
Bye, guys.